500 today, as I mentioned, lost $2.5 trillion alone. Now, America's economy, before Trump made any of these announcements, started talking about all these tariffs and the way he was in recent weeks, had a lot going for it. I mean, this is the one thing that's easy to forget in this time when it's sort of talking about how other people are screwing the U.S. all the time. America is the largest economy in the world, bar none. The GDP of America is $29 trillion. It's the largest economy in the world. It's the strongest economy in the world. The U.S. dollar remains the most powerful and dominant currency in the world. Nothing matters more. Gold is priced in dollars. Oil is priced in dollars, and that is the ultimate power. The United States labor market is strong with a 4.1% unemployment rate. That is lower than any of our major trading partners, lower than any of them. Consumer spending before Trump took office was surging up more than 4% the last quarter of last year. All of that, though, is now at risk. I mean, JP Morgan tonight upped their odds of recession they had from 6 to 60%. It was 40% on Monday. That just goes to show you how unexpected the magnitude of the tariff move by Trump was. That's a 50% increase in odds in 2 days, an unprecedented event. And then there's the headlines that we are all now inundated with, like these: Trump tariffs stoke fear of economic spiral of doom. Markets brace for global trade war. Trump mindless tariffs will cause economic havoc. And tonight already news of layoffs. The maker of Jeep and Chrysler announcing it's had to lay off already nearly 1,000 workers. Whirlpool announcing a layoff of 650, and that is the single biggest layoff in Iowa in nearly a year. All of this coming after the United States is now facing, the latest numbers, 275,000 job cuts in March, and that is a record. Now that's something that we are not hearing about from Trump at all. We're hearing about, though, from him, things like this tariff chart that we showed you yesterday. And as we came to air yesterday, that chart had just come out. The math looked odd, and I can now confirm to you that it doesn't add up. So what Trump said you were looking at in those two charts was the tariff rates that other countries are putting on American goods. One top investor called the math though illogical and absurd and full of factually incorrect numbers. And I just wanted to take a moment to explain to you why. Because when you hear Trump say, they're charging us 90%, we're only charging them 45, maybe there's a little part of you that says, are they really charging us that? That's terrible. And if so, maybe 45 is fair. It doesn't add up, and here's why. Take Vietnam. That's why I mentioned 90%. Trump claims that they have a 90% tariff on U.S. imports. So to retaliate, he would only hit them with 46%. So the reality is that Vietnam's average tariff rate is only about 9%, not 90. And they didn't have a typo. They got to that number a very specific way. They took the trade deficit that the United States has with Vietnam, which is large, $123.5 billion, and then they just divided it by the value of Vietnam's exports to the U.S., which in a big trade deficit is a small number relative to the deficit. And that's how they got to the tariff number, quote unquote, that Vietnam is charging. They get 90%. And then to look magnanimous and charitable, they say, oh, we're going to cut it in half, and that's all we'll charge Vietnam. But the bottom line is this: if the United States buys more from a country than it sells to that country, Trump is calling that a tariff. But that is not a tariff, that is capitalism. Maybe Americans buy a lot of bananas from a country because Americans like bananas and don't grow bananas in America. But that banana selling country doesn't buy a lot of American goods. That's not a tariff. A tariff is a country saying we will charge you more than it costs to make something just because, and that is a tax. And by the way, a big reason that Vietnam sells so much to the United States happens to be because American companies are making things there. They're putting up factories there to sell goods back to America because labor's cheaper in Vietnam. That did not stop Team Trump, though, from using this magic formula for all 185 countries, including that speck of land, the Heard and McDonald Islands, human population 0, which got hit with a truly magical thinking tariff of 10%. That is the formula Trump used. And Mad Money's Jim Cramer from CNBC says the math is insane. He's going to join me in a moment. So you can imagine the reaction around the world. China's Commerce Ministry says it will resolutely adopt countermeasures. In Japan, the Prime Minister putting all options on the table. In Australia, the Prime Minister, not the act of a friend. Prime Minister of Spain vowing to respond decisively. And Jeff Zeleny begins our coverage out front at the White House. And Jeff, a major